Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Renuka bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India announces Foreign Trade Policy 2023 aims to achieve country's exports to $2 trillion by 2030. Deliberations revolve around disaster-resilient infrastructure during first G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group meeting in Gujarat. Second G20 Tourism Working Group meeting to begin in Siliguri on Saturday. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi to visit China to meet his Chinese counterpart. Donald Trump becomes first ex-US president to face criminal charges. Turkey approves Finland NATO membership bid. PV Sindhu enters semi-final of Madrid Spain Masters Badminton Tournament. And in cricket, Sri Lanka failed to secure direct World Cup qualification after 2-0 loss to New Zealand. India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal has launched the Foreign Trade Policy 2023 in New Delhi on Friday. In his address, Mr. Goyal said the policy is dynamic and has been kept open-ended to accommodate the emerging needs of the time. He said the policy has been formulated after multiple stakeholder consultations. The minister said India's overall exports, including services and merchandise exports, have already crossed $750 billion and it is expected to cross $760 billion this year. He said FTP seeks to take India's exports to $2 trillion by 2030. The key approach to the foreign trade policy is based on 4 pillars: incentive to remission, export promotion through collaboration, ease of doing business and emerging areas. We spoke to economist analyst T.K. Arun on foreign trade policy announced on Friday.
The new foreign trade policy has some novel feature. It is no longer for a prefixed finite period like 5 years as previous policies had been. It is open-end. It gives certain kinds of amnesty for exporters who had availed of capital goods at concessional rates but failed to meet their export obligation.
Now we move on to our segment G20 in India. The second day of the first Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group meeting under India's G20 presidency on Friday witnessed discussions primarily focused on disaster-resilient infrastructure, financing for disaster risk reduction, and post-disaster response, recovery and build back better. 5 priority areas have been identified for discussion, which include early warning for all, disaster-resilient infrastructure, and stronger national financial frameworks. The 3-day meeting is being held at Gandhinagar in Gujarat, in which around 100 delegates, including from G20 countries and invitee countries, are participating. More from our correspondent.
During the meeting, the participants explored potential financing models, policy frameworks, and principles for resilient infrastructure. India's strong commitment towards disaster risk reduction efforts was demonstrated through the hosting of this meeting. The deliberations on disaster resilient infrastructure and financing for disaster risk reduction highlighted the need for increased investment and innovative financing mechanisms to reduce the impact of disasters. The working group meeting has enabled G20 countries to share best practices, discuss challenges, and identify opportunities to collaborate towards achieving the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction goals. Anand Kumar for World News, Gandhinagar.
The third and final day of the second Agricultural Deputies meeting was held on Friday in Chandigarh. The day started with a discussion on the outcome document. 2 consecutive sessions focused on drafting the communique by the member countries of G20. Delegates from other invited countries and international organizations also put forth their viewpoints during the session and contributed towards an inclusive discussion on the communique drafting exercise. After the session, Secretary of Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Manoj Ahuja, briefed the media and said that he hopes discussion on the draft communique and the deliberations will pave way for agreement on focus areas, which include food security and nutrition, climate-smart agriculture, inclusive agriculture value chains and food systems, and digitalization for agricultural transformation, keeping the spirit of one earth, one family and one future. Joint Secretary in the G20 Secretariat, Nagaraj Naidu, has said that G20 countries should work for a new initiative and try to build a capacity-building network so that the benefits of India's successful implementation of digital public infrastructure can be shared with the rest of the world. Mr. Naidu said it is very difficult to convince G20 countries about the importance of digital public infrastructure and its benefits, noting that many developing countries fail to understand the importance of quality data, which he said, if properly used, would result in transformational output. He said, with India taking over the G20 presidency, the issues facing the Global South have been brought into focus. Delegates participating in the G20 Sherpa meet at Kumarakom on Friday stressed the need for accelerated efforts to return to the path of resilient growth and recovery, taking everyone along. They also appreciated the focus provided by India's G20 presidency, its successful implementation of digital public infrastructure, and the need to bridge digital divide. A report from our Kochi correspondent.
The first day of the plenary session of the G20 Sherpa meet today had sessions focusing on technological transformation, accelerated inclusive and resilient growth, and women-led development. The Sherpas also took stock of the progress made by various Sherpa track working groups like digital economy, health, education, tourism, culture, and employment, among others. They proposed actionable deliverables and suggested the way forward on important deliberations. The Sherpas participated in discussions held on a houseboat on the backwaters as part of the attempt to take forward the agenda of G20. The country's G20 Sherpa, Amitabh Kant, also held productive bilateral discussions with his counterparts. The first formal day of meetings concluded with a cultural evening and dinner attended by Governor Arif Mohammad Khan and the Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan. Rajmohan, AER News, Kumaragam.
The second Tourism Working Group meeting of G20 will begin in Siliguri on Saturday. Union Tourism Secretary Arvind Singh said envoys of 8 countries including Mexico, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Singapore, Japan, Australia, Oman and South Korea will be attending the 3-day meet. He said this destination has been chosen to showcase India's geographical diversity and rich cultural heritage. Mr. Rakesh Kumar Verma, Additional Secretary, the Ministry of Tourism said there will be about 130 participants from the member nations, invited countries and international organizations, along with tourism industry partners, state tourism officials and local tour operators. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Shanghai Cooperation Organization National Security Advisors Meet, Threats and Challenges. The participants are former diplomat Ashok Sajjanhar and journalist Simran Sodhi.
We are discussing the 18th meeting of the Secretaries of the Security Councils of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was held in the national capital yesterday, and where India's National Security Advisor also spoke. He spoke specifically also on terror financing and called upon all member countries to support relevant resolutions of the UN Security Charter in this aspect. And he also said that international connectivity projects should respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the nations. Ambassador Sajjanhar, when you see these remarks, which are quite clear and which are very clearly outline India's stand on international connectivity, how much do you think this message is going out to countries like China, where one hopes that this will be received?
I think when we are talking about the issue both of terrorism and connectivity that you have mentioned, I think these issues, these aspects are relevant and valid not only for India, but for the whole world. You know, for instance, if we speak about terrorism, terrorism is a scourge, it's a menace that afflicts the whole world. It is not India only. India, of course, has been affected by it for more than 3 decades, principally in terms of the cross-border terrorism that we have been subjected to. But during that period, in the initial decade or so, the world was not willing to look at it very seriously or focus on it. They would say that this is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, so you need to talk, you need to discuss, and you need to resolve this matter. But I think after 9/11 attacks, the seriousness, the severity of this issue has been brought up in front of the whole world, and we have seen in different parts of the world now these terrorist attacks taking place, and the whole world really needs to get together. The second issue that you mentioned is of connectivity projects. And this, you would recall, India has been speaking about this right from the very beginning, when the first idea of, let's say, the Belt and Road Initiative, what was earlier known as the One Belt, One Road project is concerned, when that was launched in 2013 during the visit of the Chinese President Xi Jinping, first to Kazakhstan on the overland route and then the maritime route during his visit to Indonesia. So right from that time, and when the first BRI forum was organized in 2017, India has been saying that all countries concerned, their concurrence should be taken. And of course, the territorial integrity and sovereignty of countries should be respected. At that time, not very many countries had again supported or paid much attention to what India was saying, but increasingly, as we have seen the Belt Road Initiative projects, whether in Asia or in Africa or in Latin America, they have been getting problematic, and they have been resulting in huge debts as far as the host countries, the so-called beneficiary countries, are concerned. So I think the world is waking up to these challenges. So I think as far as the world is concerned, it recognizes that the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all countries should be respected and should be kept in mind. But whether this message will be taken on board by China, which launched the BRI initiative, I have my doubts, very serious doubts, because I think developing countries want money, want investment for infrastructure projects. And they don't want any questions to be asked, and that is what China is prepared to do. But of course, we've seen these loans, and they create a lot of difficulty and problems for the host receiving countries.
Master Sajanar, as you pointed out, and we also have Mr. Doval's comments yesterday, where he drew attention to the issue of cross-border terrorism and said, any act of terrorism, regardless of its motivation, is unjustifiable. It is important, therefore, for all countries to fulfill the obligations enshrined in relevant counter-terrorism cooperation protocols, including the UNSC resolutions 1267, 1373 and successor resolutions. A lot of analysts have pointed out that his comments on adhering to the UNSC resolution is also significant because India is actually trying to hint at the roadblocks that it has encountered in its campaign against global terrorism, because every time at the UN, India tries to designate a terrorist as a global terrorist, the obstruction comes from China. Do you feel that the world is finally realizing that one has to move beyond talk and these resolutions have to be adhered to, and also China's continuous obstructions have to give way?
No, you're very right, Simran. I think the world has realized for quite some time. And that is why you would recall that, when Masood Azhar was to be designated as an international terrorist under the UN Security Council Resolution 1267, it took India about 10 years to get him designated as such. The whole exercise started in 2009 when China put a technical hold on it, and then after that it was in 2015, 2018. Ultimately in 2019, India was successful in getting Masood Azhar also designated as an international terrorist. But you would again recall that happened when there were countries like the United States, like France, which threatened China that they would raise the matter in the full UN Security Council, because the 1267 committee is a much just smaller committee comparatively, and they would ask for an explanation from China as to what were the reasons why it was not amenable, why it was not willing to put Masood Azhar in the international terrorism category. And it was because of this pushback from some of these other permanent members of the UN Security Council that China relented and agreed to designate Masood Azhar. Similar has been the case with some of the other terrorists more recently. And what we see is that China is politicizing this whole exercise. I think the whole world has realized that terrorism is an issue which afflicts the whole world. I think China is in the UN Security Council possibly the only country which has been playing politics because it wants to protect Pakistan. And as we know, about 2/3 of the terrorists which are designated under 1267, they come from Pakistan. But because of this iron brother relationship that China claims with Pakistan, so it does not want to let go of it. It wants to protect it under all circumstances. And that is why China has been laying roadblocks in terms of putting technical holds. The organizer Jaish-e-Mohammed JEM was put as a terrorist organization by the United Nations Security Council way back in 2002. But Masood Azhar, who is heading that particular organization, it took us about 10 years, as I mentioned, to bring it on board as far as an international terrorist is concerned. So we have tried to tell China, number one, that terrorism is an issue that afflicts all countries, so there should not be any politics that should be played. And secondly, it does not, as far as credibility and standing and reputation of China is concerned, in terms of its being in support of the international community fighting against terrorism, it doesn't stand it in good stead. That it is seen to be protecting confirmed terrorists without any viable explanation. And all the information is usually provided, but because of its political stance to support Pakistan, China puts these obstacles. But I think it is getting increasingly cornered, and we see that increasingly the technical holds that it puts, it is forced to retract from them much sooner, much earlier than was used to be the case. Like Masood Azhar, it was 10 years. In some of the more recent cases, it is in 2 years or 1 year that China has been forced to remove these technical holds.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on the SCO. And India is holding the presidency of SCO this year. And we will also be hosting the summit later this year. And we will continue our discussions on all issues related with SCO. With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi will be on a 2-day visit of China, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan confirmed on Friday. Hayashi, who is all set to visit Beijing for the first time in over 3 years, will kickstart his trip on Saturday. He will meet with his Chinese counterpart, Qin Gang. The visit of Japanese Foreign Minister comes at a time when ties between the two nations remain tense over issues including Beijing's recent detention of a Japanese businessman and a territorial row. Hayashi's visit to China follows talks between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida in Bangkok in November. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said that China sees Hayashi's visit as important and in the interest of good ties. Former U.S. President Donald Trump was indicted in New York on charges involving payments to a porn star made during his 2016 presidential campaign to silence claims of an extramarital sexual encounter. A New York grand jury voted to indict Trump for the payments made to a porn star, making him the first ever former U.S. president to face criminal charges. According to multiple reports, Trump is expected to turn himself in next week as the details of surrender are being worked out. The Office of New York prosecutor Alvin Bragg, who got a grand jury to indict Trump, confirmed that the Republicans' lawyers have been contacted to coordinate his surrender for arraignment. In a big relief to foreign workers in the U.S. technology sector, a judge ruled that spouses of H-1B visa holders can now work in the United States. The decision was made as U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan dismissed a lawsuit filed by Save Jobs USA, which had approached the court to revoke the Obama-era regulation that gave employment authorization cards to spouses of certain categories of H-1B visa holders. Save Jobs USA is an organization comprising IT workers who claimed they lost their jobs to H-1B workers. Tech giants such as Amazon, Apple, Google, and Microsoft had opposed the lawsuit. The U.S. has so far issued nearly 1 lakh work authorizations to spouses of H-1B workers. While Save Jobs USA said it plans to appeal against the court ruling, the H-1B visa is a non-immigrant visa that allows U.S. companies to employ foreign workers in specialty occupations that require theoretical or technical expertise. The UK has signed a deal to join a trade pact with 11 Asia and Pacific nations 3 years after it officially left the European Union. The government said joining the group will boost UK exports by cutting tariffs on goods. However, the government's own estimates show being in the bloc will only add 0.08% to the size of the UK's economy. The trade area covers a market of around 500 million people. The Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership CPTPP was established in 2018 and includes Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore and Vietnam. Membership of the CPTPP loosens restrictions on trade between members and reduces tariffs, a form of border tax on goods. Finland is all set to join North Atlantic Treaty Organization NATO after it cleared the last significant hurdle as Turkey's parliament approved the Nordic countries' accession to the Western Military Alliance. The Turkish parliament on Thursday voted unanimously in favor of Finland's application to join the NATO. The Turkish General Assembly, controlled by a coalition led by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling Justice and Development Party, voted to ratify the move just before midnight, making Turkey the last of the 30 NATO countries to back Finland's membership. Turkey was the last NATO member to approve Finland's accession. Finnish President Sauli Niinistö thanked all 30 NATO members for their support and added that his country is ready to join the military alliance. On the other hand, neighbouring Sweden is still waiting for Turkey and Hungary to approve its NATO bid. In Pakistan, a Human Rights Observer 2023 fact sheet has underscored the increase in religious content against minorities in curriculum and textbooks during the year 2022. The Center for Social Justice on Thursday issued the Human Rights Observer 2023, an annual fact sheet. The report covers 5 key issues impacting religious minorities, including discrimination in the education system, the prevalence of forced faith conversion, abuse of blasphemy laws, the establishment of the National Commission for Minorities, and jail remissions for minority prisoners. The fact sheet showed that as many as 171 people were accused under the blasphemy laws. Furthermore, 124 reported incidents of forced faith conversions involving girls and women from minority communities were analyzed, which included 81 Hindu, 42 Christian and 1 Sikh. Only 12% of the victims were adults. The fact sheet stated that no progress was made regarding providing remission to minority prisoners during 2022, despite the fact that this concession had been available for Muslim prisoners since 1978. It further stated that the establishment of the statutory National Commission for Minorities remained pending. Russia on Friday said that a ceasefire in Ukraine would not enable it to achieve the goals of its special military operation at the moment. The Kremlin was reacting after Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko called for an immediate ceasefire without preconditions and for both Moscow and Kyiv to start negotiations on a lasting peace settlement. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that Russia had noted Lukashenko's comments and that President Vladimir Putin would discuss it with him next week. But he said Russia's goal in Ukraine could not be achieved at the moment through a halt in fighting. Earlier, Russia said it is open for peace, but has made clear this would only be on its terms. It says Kyiv must accept the new realities on the ground. However, Ukraine has said Russia must withdraw its troops as a precursor to any peace deal and says any temporary ceasefire would only allow Russia to regroup for future military action. The key domestic share markets on Friday closed with gains of more than 1.5%. The Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange closed near 59,000 points, while the Nifty at the National Stock Exchange ended above 17,300 points. Both indices climbed amid positive global cues. A report from the business desk.
Sensex rose by 1,031 points, or 1.8%, to finish at 58,992. Nifty also settled at 279 points, or 1.6%, up at 17,360. Asian stocks advanced on the last session of March quarter. South Korea's Kospi rose by up to 0.96%, and Japan's Nikkei 225 accelerated 0.9%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng was up 0.5%, and China's Shanghai Composite gained 0.35%. Singapore's Straits Times added marginally by 0.05%. European shares are positive in intraday trade. Oil price was stable ahead of the key US inflation data, which could give clues on future interest rate moves. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at around $79.30 per barrel. Back home, the gold prices at the multi-commodity exchange for April contracts was trading at around 59,436 rupees per 10 grams. Silver was trading at around 71,989 rupees per kilogram for May contracts when reports last came in. In the foreign exchange market, the rupee today rose up by 16 paise to close at 82 rupees and 18 paise against the US dollar. Arjun Chaudhary for World News All India Radio.
In Madrid, Spain Masters Badminton Tournament, PV Sindhu entered the semi-finals, beating Denmark's Mia Blichfeldt 21-14, 21-17 in the quarterfinal on Friday. She will take on Yeo Jia Min of Singapore in the semi-final on Saturday. However, Kidambi Srikanth crashed out of the tournament, losing to Kento Nishimoto of Japan 18-21, 15-21 in the quarterfinals. Sri Lanka has failed to directly qualify for the ICC ODI World Cup following another defeat at Hamilton in New Zealand on Friday. With a series defeat, Sri Lanka has been eliminated from finishing in the top 8 of the ICC Super League, and which the top 8 teams had direct qualification for the World Cup. Sri Lanka will now be required to play in the ICC World Cup qualifiers, which will be held in Zimbabwe in a month of June and July, in which the top 2 teams will qualify for the ICC ODI World Cup. The ICC World Cup hosted by India will commence on 5th of October this year. The teams that have qualified for the tournament are New Zealand, England, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Australia, Afghanistan and West Indies. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Guardian writes Wimbledon allows Russian and Belarusian players back into tournament. The New York Times reports Eurozone inflation continues to fall as energy prices ease. Le Monde writes France President Emmanuel Macron unveils plan to save water amid climate change toll. The Straits Times reports Singapore and China elevate ties following meeting between Prime Minister Lee and President Xi Jinping. And now a quick look at the headlines once again. India announces Foreign Trade Policy 2023 aims to achieve country's exports to $2 trillion by 2030. Deliberations revolve around disaster-resilient infrastructure during first G20 Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group meeting in Gujarat. Second G20 Tourism Working Group meeting to begin in Siliguri on Saturday. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi to visit China to meet his Chinese counterpart. Donald Trump becomes first ex-US president to face criminal charges. Turkey approves Finland NATO membership bid. PV Sindhu enters semi-final of Madrid Spain Masters Badminton Tournament. And in cricket, Sri Lanka failed to secure direct World Cup qualification after 2-0 loss to New Zealand. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Bulgaria. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.